part of that difference comes from the fact that men are using more lethal means.
So people who identify, right, as I'm a man, that this is how they also should and should not express themselves.
Because men are held to different standards, like stereotypically,
there are
whenever you're like,
some
oh, you
males
shouldn't cry because this,
who
you shouldn't
are
show your
more
emotions.
in touch with their emotions.
Masculine.
Toxic masculinity is the idea that people have to be a certain way in order to be a man. To be a real man looks like a certain set of behaviors. It typically looks like being the alpha male. That means being aggressive, being dominant, having this restricted range of emotions, not feeling weak, not feeling sad. Real men don't cry, sayings like that. And the downstream impact of these ideas, these toxic masculinity ideas, is that mental health is better when you don't experience emotions, when these actual normal human emotions, sadness is a normal human emotion, when you're trying to be a real man, you're not going to experience them, so you just push them down. Well, we're not real good at not experiencing emotion. It's a human condition. It's a natural, basic human condition to experience emotion.
Toxic masculinity, so the machismo male and the persona that they're supposed to have. You're not man enough if you are in touch with your emotions, if you're mentally distraught. That whole toughen it up attitude, I think a lot of males really feel that pressure too. And I mean, females absolutely get pressure too in the, oh, if we show emotions, then we're too emotional, right? So there's still for sure a lot of stigmas for females as well, but definitely I just do see that pressure for males and not feeling like they can express themselves because they wouldn't be man enough.
It's a very loosely defined term. It's somewhat of a leftist term for what most people would interpret. I hate to use that word again, but toxic masculinity is, for the most part, the most negative of male traits or characteristics. And my interpretation of toxic masculinity is that, quite simply, anyone is capable of having negative traits. You can look on the extremes of male and female behavior, or whatever you identify as, and still have extremely quote-unquote toxic traits. So it doesn't necessarily have to be male, but going back to the definition of toxic masculinity, quote-unquote, it definitely seems that those extremely negative male qualities are the ones being talked about. Quite frankly, anyone's just capable of that.
I think that we're still seeing, again, kind of what we touched on earlier, it's still so prevalent, this, in order to be a man, right? So like we just talked about identity. So people who identify, right, as I'm a man, that this is how they also should and should not express themselves. And talking about their mental health is usually categorized as the ways that they should not be expressing themselves. Because if you're going through distress, if you can't handle it, it's pretty much what it is, right? You can't handle all the pressures that are going on, so that's why you're too stressed out, then you don't have the right to identify as a man.
The most common, because of where I've worked, has probably been some relation to depression. Depression is an extremely common one. It has some severe impacts. Suicidality is a symptom of depression. It's not something different from it. So people thinking about suicide is a central part of it. So I'd say depression. Depression co-occurs with all sorts of disorders. If you take a group of people with trauma, about half of them are going to qualify for depression. Depression probably across the board is one of the more common ones. And if there is ever a situation where you're going, my life isn't living out to be the way I want it to be. I'm not able to get the things I want to do, or I'm still trying to figure out how to do the thing and enjoy the things that I want to enjoy. You're not living life to the fullest. Then I would encourage people to seek out mental health. You don't have to wait until you're on the brink of suicide, or when you're so depressed that you can't get out of bed to go, well, gosh, I need to do something different. You can do stuff before then and learn the skills.
It is confidential, so if you're seeing a counselor or a therapist, like what's said in the room, what they talk about, like that's going to be a completely confidential service. So knowing that maybe can give some solace to people too. Talking to the right person is also important too, and there are so many people on this campus ready to listen to students. Anyone at RISE being one of them, the Dean of Students Office, all these mental health services too. So recognizing that you don't have to struggle through this by yourself. So just getting rid of that thought in itself. And with that thought in itself is challenging to get rid of. And so that you can talk to people who are going to be non-judgmental. So that fear of judgment that we talked about right at the beginning, that there are for sure people who are not going to judge you for wanting to get help. And I think kind of what you touched on earlier, that we're starting to hear that message a little bit more and more. Like we're proud of people for talking about their distress, because I think of it as so like the pressures that you might get from a family for talking about it, how could they almost, like the word defend themselves, but defend themselves that this is what I think is best for me. That's it right there. This is what I think is best for me. And if I'm my best self, like if you respect that I'm listening to myself and my own needs, then that means when I am my best self, I'm going to be able to support you even better, right? So the family's like, how are you going to support us? How are you going to do this? They're saying, this is going to help me out. So if I'm getting helped out, then that means that I can help you too.